Fun little history fact, folks. Did you know that Grave of the Fireflies and My Neighbor Totoro were released together as a double feature? I really hope they started off with Totoro and then did Grave of the Fireflies, because it's just a descent to hell from there, as opposed to Grave of the Fireflies, which I think was made first, starting off, scaring the living shit out of families, making them all cry, making them leave the theater and miss the movie that is joyful and uplifting and will definitely make you feel better. Or was that maybe by design? In any case, it really seems like a shitty marketing decision. What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and I'm here to state the obvious in my Studio Ghibli series, and let you know that Grave of the Fireflies is no perfect movie just for being the definition of misery porn. Now, for those who don't know, Grave of the Fireflies is about a teenage boy named Seita and his little sister Setsuko, who are all by themselves as they are struggling to survive during the last few months of World War II in Japan. Very uplifting stuff coming from Studio Ghibli. But this movie was directed by Isao Takahata, who made the second largest amount of movies for Studio Ghibli and was kind of considered the darker master of Japanese animation, at least compared to Miyazaki, which, yeah, that doesn't really say much. But what was interesting about Isao Takahata as a director was that he had such a diverse amount of animation styles. Practically every movie he made looked and felt different from the others while still being a lot more dark and realistic in terms of the subject matter. But even more interesting, Isao Takahata wasn't an animator. Dude didn't draw. Which is so weird, considering the animation in this film can be just as bright and colorful as it can be dark and grim, and that actually kind of works to the movie's advantage, because with that, it makes it harder to predict whether each scene is going to be happy or sad or a little bit of a mixture of both. I mean, when there are scenes involving destruction and peril involving Tokyo citizens, it of course is shot with much darker, more grim colors. But what was so interesting about the movie in general was that they actually outlined character designs or settings in brown as opposed to black to kind of give the movie a warmer look to it so that people wouldn't be completely miserable as they were watching the movie. And again, that does kind of work to his advantage. I remember watching it for the first time, and for the first half of the movie, I did think it was sad, but it didn't really hit me on that hard of a level until things really got serious towards the second half. And I think that was kind of by design. It definitely had a much more somber feel to it. Joe Hisashi's score was just as beautiful as always, but a lot more bleak by using softer instruments like, again, soft melodies from piano keys to really make you feel bittersweet, because without spoiling anything, the movie starts at the very beginning, so you know what the eventual outcome's going to be. And I don't even know why I'm not spoiling it, but I know for a fact there are a good chunk of viewers of mine who have never seen an anime, and if this was the first video of mine to for you to see, sorry, go see the other ones. But Grave of the Fireflies has often been considered an anti-war movie just because of how uncompromising the imagery is when you're portraying victims of war, victims of destruction. But Takahata has repeatedly said, or had repeatedly said throughout his lifetime, that it wasn't an anti-war movie, it was a survival film. And honestly, I completely agree, because as he pointed out, if he were to rewrite it and be about a tsunami or an earthquake or, hell, based on what's going on right now, you could definitely say an epidemic would be, a pandemic, epidemic, whatever, would be another example, and the majority of the story would remain the exact same. This brother and sister would suffer a tremendous loss, they'd be left completely on their own to survive, and they would make a ton of morally and legally questionable choices in order to survive. For me personally, the movie's main theme is about pride. When you live on your own, or when you're forced to live on your own, when is it acceptable to accept help from other people? When is it more important to focus on your own independence? This movie asks these questions in such a tough and brutal way and doesn't really leave any honest answer, any simple answers. And the ones that are simple, you don't necessarily agree with, because on the surface level, this kid Seita could be viewed as an incredibly unlikable person because he refuses help from so many other people because he's afraid of looking weak, afraid of looking like a complete pushover. But when he does accept help from others, over time they become more resentful of the fact that he has absolutely nothing to offer to them, because there aren't enough jobs to for him to work in order to provide for the other people. And even though he is looking, the caretakers just look at him, look at his failures, and just assume that he's not working hard enough. And over time, he slowly regresses into believing that he isn't working hard enough, that he really should be the only one to look after himself and his little sister. And he suffers a great deal for it. I myself have often wondered throughout my life why I keep refusing to accept help from people, and it of course is based on looking weak. When I'm working, my biggest problem is not asking help for people on the line cooking, even though I get a shit ton of orders that I stubbornly seem to think that I can complete on my own, even though I know for a fact that I'm just going to get frustrated, I can't, and I'm going to hear it from my second in command to just say, don't be afraid to ask. So as I made it clear already, this kid does make a shit ton of crappy choices, and it really does affect the dignity and, in some ways, health of his younger sister. But oddly enough, we still like him as a character because he does care deeply about his family. He does love his mother. He does love his father and the sacrifices that he believes he's making as a soldier, and really does wish that he can contribute to the war effort. If anything, he loves his sister more than anything in the world, and even when he makes crappy choices like stealing from farmers, he's not doing it because he wants to hurt the farmers or anything like that. He just seems to have it in his mind that there is no other way to go about it. And as for Setsuko, even though she's not really the main focus of the movie, she is definitely the character that you can feel for the most, because she is the symbol of innocence in this movie. She does everything that you would expect a little kid to do. She lashes out at people for seemingly no reason. She asks really tough questions in such a blunt and straightforward way because she doesn't know how serious asking such a question could be. And most importantly, because she's not young enough to understand what the consequences of people's actions are going to be, which really just ties more into the themes of loss of innocence and survival that Takahata spent a great deal putting into explicit detail in his screenplay. I'm so blown away that I can't speak in complete sentences or coherent sentences, but that's Grave of the Fireflies for you, and that is the one issue with this movie. It's not by any means as rewatchable as any other Studio Ghibli movie or as many other war movies too, because when you look at stuff that's also brutal like Saving Private Ryan or even Lone Survivor, those movies you can still rewatch over and over again because there is an incredible amount of likability to the characters, more so than in this one. And with Grave of the Fireflies, there isn't really that much to analyze on repeated viewings. What you see the first time, you're going to notice over and over again, and it's not going to lose anything, but because you've already seen everything there is to discover, it's not really as impactful as other movies. Hell, it's not even like this one miniseries, Patrick Melrose, which has the best performance from Benedict Cumberbatch ever, where it is also misery porn. It is a person going on a downward spiral, trying to climb back up and trying to stay up. But there was so much more that I can analyze that would tie into the themes of this main character. Not just the performances, but the cinematography, the costume design, the set design. Lots of sets and costumes of the color blue just to symbolize how depression haunts him every single day of his life. I don't really get that with Grave of the Fireflies. The one thing I've noticed on repeated viewings is that they maintain how close the brother-sister bond is between Seita and Setsuko by constantly having the two of them in the exact same shot, which is a really clever way of symbolizing how important this relationship is. And during the beginning and end, there are some shots that heavily rely on the use of red to symbolize the amount of love that they have towards each other and them at probably their most peaceful and content in life. But again, I noticed those things the first time around. I just really couldn't put my finger on it, and I was just at such a loss of words because of how fucking sad everything is. If you cry about anything in this movie, it'll be about Setsuko because she is the definition of innocence in this film. Some scenes are really tough to swallow, but Grave of the Fireflies is incredibly well animated, well acted, and so uncompromising in its subject matter without ever getting gratuitous. If you're concerned about, like, really gory events portrayed as a consequence of war, you're only gonna get, like, one or two, and they don't even last that long. So Yeah, it's not an easy watch. It's probably something that you're never going to watch again after you see it, but if you're into that kind of thing, which I am, it's worth the one viewing. And for that reason, I am going to give Grave of the Fireflies a 4 out of 5. Thank you for watching. I didn't think I was going to get through this entire thing without, like, taking a deep breath or pausing or fighting the urge to tear up, because I do remember when I teared up at the end of this movie. Thank God nobody else was in the house except for my dog. Dogs are a great thing to hug and cuddle as you're crying. You probably already knew that, but why am I still talking? Guys, thanks. I needed that. Thanks as always for watching. If you have seen Grave of the Fireflies, if you clicked on this, you probably have. Let me know how depressed you were as you were watching. Let me know what's one of the saddest movies that you've ever seen. Mine is another Ghibli movie, and we'll get to that later. Be sure to let me know in the comments below. Be sure to stay tuned for more reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to smile. And if you do watch this movie, watch something happy afterwards. Watch a comedy. Watch your favorite comedy. You'll feel a shit ton better. I'm going to shut up now.